I've one kind of final slight little deviation I'd love to entertain if you'd be up for it. You mentioned the word superstition, and it kind of made me go, "Oh, this is kind of an interesting one." You know, nowadays we live in this very rational, scientific world, and even like I compare English to Irish. English is quite a measured language. It's very calculated, very quantified, very rational. I look at Irish, which we've been kind of we learned to growing up, but in recent years we're back studying it. And I really appreciate it's 3 times older than English, and it's much more, gives a natural space for the kind of supernatural, for the superstitious, for the world that is beyond that we can touch and measure and quantify. And I just wonder, as you kind of delve or have explored more of ecology and nature and the natural world than we have, where does superstition or these kind of other beyond realms, I think, what's the word in English?
I guess there's like, you know, that idea of like, we all have wonder, we all, you know, most of us want to cultivate this idea of wonder within nature, but there is beyond ourselves. There's, you know, I don't know exactly. You can get the sentiment of what we're saying without us
I exactly get the sentiment. How much more time do we have?
Sure, whatever. I'm having a ball. I'm enjoying this as much as anything. So
okay, then I'll give you a little insight into the work by a Flemish philosopher whom I greatly admired, and that answers your question. His name was Ulrich Liebrecht. He died a few years ago, and he was an interesting man. He loved life, and he loved his wine, and he loved the song, and he loved company. He was also a great philosopher, and he started his life as a sinologist. He studied Chinese literature and culture and languages, and then he suddenly realized, if I want to understand Chinese philosophy, I should also study other Asian philosophies, which he did, and then decided that maybe I should also re-study Western philosophy, and he did, from pre-Socratian to post-humanist, and then he decided, Africa and also philosophies and the Aboriginal people in Australia as well, so he studied those philosophies, and then he studied all philosophies of the world, and he decided, now I'm going to write a little book on comparative philosophy. That has appeared 7 volumes, but what he does in his work, and that's brilliant, and that answers your question about superstition, he said, philosophy is about making sense of the world. Philosophy is about the question, who am I? What is the world? How can I know the world? How do I relate to the world? And he says, when you look at how all philosophies of this world have approached this question, you find 2 paradigms, very important paradigms. And one paradigm is the paradigm of separating and labeling. And we all learned this when we were a baby on the arm of our mom. At a certain moment, mommy will say to us, that's daddy, or that's your other mummy, and this is mummy, and that is you. What you learn at that moment is use your senses, and through your sensory perception, separate presences from each other. Mummy looks different from daddy, smells different, sounds different, etc., etc. And then you give a name. Mummy, daddy, I. And that goes on. Street, car, butterfly, flower. That's the way we discover the world and make sense of it by separating through sensory perception and labeling. Then, of course, you can ask a deeper philosophical question. How do these entities that you've separated connect? And when you use the same paradigm, sensory perception and labeling, you immediately come in the system of hierarchies, low to high, primitive to developed, etc., etc. Always building hierarchies, systematics. That already happened in classical Western society with Aristotle, who divided the world into minerals, lower plants, lower animals, higher animals, humans. That's what we do. That's how they relate and connect in that paradigm. Then, and what you also do with that paradigm, you, in terms of relationships, you look at causalities. When this happened, that happens. You can observe that scientifically and describe it great. And then you have one definite philosophical question, which is, how do all these entities that you have separated and all the relations, what is of all these entities and the relations the deepest essence, deepest philosophical question. Yeah, in this paradigm, the answer is E is mc squared, the formula by which Albert Einstein connected matter and energy. Great! World is understood, described, and we know it all. But this is another paradigm. And when I explain this to my student, I always ask them, ladies and gentlemen, whom of you is now deeply in love with another person? And always some people raise their hands, much less than I would have thought. But anyway, some raised their hands, because I thought that everyone in this world must be continuously in love, but apparently not the case. And then I asked them, describe me your beloved. And if that person would use the first paradigm, the person would say, my beloved is of the male or female sex, is 1 meter and 72 centimeters, weighs 69 kilograms, heartbeat in rest 69, blood pressure 110/90, etc., etc., etc. That's paradigm 1. And then I always say, listen, if you would do this, I can assure you, you're not in love anymore. When you're truly in love, you will use a phrase like, when my beloved smiles, the sun rises. Now, in paradigm 1, this is absolute nonsense. This is superstition. This exactly now is the idea that your beloved smiles and the sunrise are connected. That's superstition. That things in your life are related to great other things that you cannot scientifically prove. All superstition. That there must be a God. All superstition. We cannot prove that in paradigm 1. But when you love, this makes sense. This makes complete sense. When your beloved smiles, the sun rises. What is described here is not the reality that we can describe scientifically. This is the reality of experience, of what the great philosopher Heidegger called Dasein, of being in the world. Being in the world in meaningful and a myriad of relationships. You cannot describe those scientifically, in causality. You can only describe those in what I would call poetry, metaphor, myth, religious images, music, dance, performance arts, all kinds of arts. And when you call that superstition, then God help us. This is about what you experience meaningfully in your relationship with the world, which cannot be scientifically described. Now, that's something that in the age of reason, the 17th century, Western society wanted to get rid of. All superstition. The only reality is that reality that reason can describe. And then we basically disenchanted the world. Because the moment we're enchanted, we describe or voice our experienced relationships in all kinds of images and metaphors, which at first glance sound very superstitious, in a deeper sense have an enormous meaning.
What an amazing answer. I enjoyed that immensely.
I love how passionate you are. Like, I'd love to come have lunch with you someday. I'd love to come like, I mean it. Like, I find you so inspiring. I feel very interconnected with you.
Thank you. And I with you. But you see, I would always say boys, from my age perspective, what I found that being in love with his world, being in love with the whole community of life is an enormous joy. You know, I cannot be not passionate, because this is where I think the true essence of what we are, of what nature is connection, experienced connection, love. I fall in love about 10 times a day. I fall in love with the both of you now.
Likewise.
Back at you, Matthijs. Back at you.
And isn't that wonderful? That makes the rest of my day different. So I feel that this is, in a sense, basically, how would you call it, the key to another future. I always, at every public speech I now give, and now I can do this because I'm a professor emeritus, so I'm not checked by the university anymore, but at the end of each speech I now say, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one way to go. Fall in love again with yourself, with the people around you, with humanity, and with the great community of life which we call the earth. And that is the key.